Hello, everyone. Now, at SeedLegals, I'm privileged to meet many founders, some amazing founders. When I meet an amazing founder, something jumps out. And I think, as an investor, I'm not an investor myself these days, but as a proxy investor, you're always looking for that magic person to invest in, or magic product, or magic growth curve. But in the early days, you're very much investing in a founder. And so at our SeedLegals Plus lunch, I happened to meet George, and I loved how George was insanely good at fundraising, insanely good at telling a story. The story had ups and downs and more dramas than a Netflix series. So lots of times people ask me, how do we go about fundraising? Where do we find investors? What to do if I'm turned down? How to come up with some good valuation? How do I raise more than like 150K? So I loved the discussion with George. I thought we have to get on a call and relay the story to others. So without further ado, George, delighted to catch up. Thank you so much for telling or sharing the story to inspire others. So tell us a bit more about background, and then we're going to you start, and then we'll cover a range of things about how to find investors, how to promote things, how much to raise, and what when things go wrong, and the works. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm the founder and CEO of WAC. WAC is a B2C app that is helping hourly paid workers. We tend to help shift workers, but now a little more self-employed freelancers. And we help them keep track of their hours, their earnings, their rotas, their money, anything that comes with that chaotic lifestyle when it comes to hourly paid work. So we're at an exciting stage. We're kind of moving from startup to scale up. It's been a very challenging but extremely fun journey. I've loved every second. And yeah, definitely. I mean, I love being in the position now. If at any point I can help founders, that we're in the situation that I was in, 2-3 years ago, I am always up for that, because if I'd have known some of the stuff I know now, it would have definitely been easier. So it's really great that founders can get access to things like this. It's super helpful. Yeah.
All right, so you've raised an amazing 900K kind of pre-launch, which is like somewhat off the scales for most startups. How did you pick the amount you wanted? And let's talk about that. And then let's talk about where you went looking for investors.
Sure. So, so 900,000 has been really a continuous raise. I didn't plan on doing that because I think one of the things that I was confused about when I first started was like the rounds that you do. And, at the first opportunity, you try and bootstrap. And I had no one to bootstrap from. So I was like, well, what do you do if you can't bootstrap? I actually was lucky enough to have £5,000 off of my parents, which they'd saved for me for my wedding one day, that currently it still hasn't happened. So, I was lucky enough to have that kind of got me to that first part. But then I, tried to raise like a pre-seed, and that next bit came as £70,000. And then after that, really, I just tried to raise, I opened around and tried to get it done within a few months, but I just couldn't do it because we were too early. We were B2C, we were non-revenue, all of like the highest risk things. I just couldn't ever do it. So I ended up just doing continuous raises of multiple things, ASAs, which are seed fasts, I think on SeedLegals, and convertible loans and angel investments and all different things along the way to finally get the figure of around 900,000 to get us to this stage. So it's been a long journey of kind of small raising and proving to get the next part unlocked, really.
Right. So one of the things I really liked about, our discussion and your journey is it really reflects the way fundraising has changed. So once upon a time, you wanted to raise, let's say, £500,000, and you'd be spending forever talking to investors, and people go, hey, yes, George, I'm in for 20K. And you go, all right, great, come back in 6 months' time when I've got my round. But that's all changed. And now there's a concept of agile fundraising. So as somebody says, I'd like to invest, you go, yes, let me send you a seed fast. You still have in mind the goal of a funding round, but rather than waiting and not taking anyone's money until the round, you now start taking money beforehand, and then you top up the round. So it sort of seems opportunistic, and that seems to then be very much you, right? Which is, as you are, with infectious enthusiasm telling people about what you do, you now try to convert that into investment. So let's talk about how you found and continue to find investors. Are you doing cold outreach? Are you using LinkedIn? Are you talking to customers? Your customer, by the way, is are low-paid workers using your app for their benefit. So reaching out to customers works well in some cases, not in your case. And I think when talking, I was also really impressed that, ethically, you'd like to design your business to be, in tune with your customer base. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, sure. So I've tried to find money every way possible. It started, really, I had to start with validation. So before I even knew how to start fundraising or where to go, or I realized now that actually what I was doing naturally was validating the business at first. So I actually did a competition where it was Santander Entrepreneur Awards. It was 3 months after I registered, super, super early, but I was, push, go for it. And then out of, I think it was over 2,000 people, I got down to the final 6. And so after a few months of registering the business and having no clue what the hell I was doing, I was pitching in the West End in London, like down to the final 6. And that was in front of some really cool judges. And that really was the validation I needed to then kind of think, right, I was at law school at that point. I had kind of based those subjects I'd chosen, like company law, IP law. I had it in my head, this is the direction I wanted to take, but I didn't believe I could do it. I had no idea how to start an app or a tech company or a company in any form. So I'd kind of done that. But after this competition, I knew it was time to just run with it and go for it, because I got that validation from the judges and I realized, this is actually something serious. So that helped, and that built me a very small network. And then I realized I then had to raise money to get to the next stage, which is getting the designs done and starting to look at development quotes and things, because I kind of drawn out what I wanted it to all look like. So the next stage was that, and I didn't know how to do that. So I put myself through an accelerator, and then on that accelerator, I got access to some grant funding. So that paid for some of the legals and some of the development work. But then I knew I had to have that match funded. So I realized I had to find that next part. That 5,000 that I'd spoken about that my parents kindly gave to me, I'd used to live on after I decided to quit my law degree, quit my law career, defer my LPC and go for it. So I didn't have any extra money. So at that point, I'd actually reached out to the university that I was at the time. They had never done any startups or what do they call them when spin outs. They hadn't done any spin outs at that point. So it was a kind of new concept for them. I ended up speaking to them and saying, I need £25,000. And they said, well, we've never done this before. We think about it. They were very impressed with how far I got for the competition. It had done good for them as well. So they ended up coming back to me saying that they'd like to invest it. But it was at obviously a crazy valuation, because I had mock-ups. That's about it. So it was very, very low. So it was something like 30 or 35%. And I remember thinking, like, no way, what the hell? I wouldn't work this hard if that's already gone at first. That's almost like, half and half. So I turned it down, and they were super shocked. I didn't know if I was doing the worst thing ever, because I didn't know if that was good or bad. But I went with my gut and thought, no, I'm going to do it. Anyway, they ended up coming back and offering a convertible loan, which I then had to, learn what that was. And essentially, it's obviously where they invest the money now and then it will convert later on, or you repay it either with interest or you convert it at a discount. So then the negotiations happened with the discount and what we had offered them. And finally, we agreed. I then spent that money, and then I needed a little more money the next year. So I then was stuck again. Where do I go? And what I actually did was, because I didn't have a network at all, I didn't know anyone that had owned a business. I come from, just a real working class background. So I was completely stuck. So I literally sat on LinkedIn and I messaged 2,000 people off of a list that I found online. And from that, I managed to raise £70,000 pre-seed funding. And I actually also then got an introduction to our chairman now, who is Tim Brook-Tom, who was a former chair of Monzo many years ago. So he's got huge amounts of experience and was very, very lucky to, have him come in at such an early stage. So that unlocked that next part of funding. And then that round went through as a 70,000 pre-seed, and the 25,000 convertible loan converted, and it converted at just under 2%. And less than a year earlier, I nearly accepted 35 or something. So it just shows how you can take so many different directions, not really knowing and not knowing what's best or expectations. So that was quite a big whoa moment, for me to think, imagine if I had done that different. So that really was the first stages. And then that allowed me to unlock a new network. I've been really, really keen to every single person I meet, every investor I have. I'm then who do you have? I need this. Well, I need that support. I need funding. I need this. Who do you have in your network that you think would be interested in what we're doing? And really then that has just unlocked and unlocked and unlocked to basically have an absolutely incredible network that are really supportive of me and the business and always want to help. And I think in most cases, exited founders or advisors or, they want to help. So it's about finding those people and having kind of an objective and knowing what you're asking for. And then that has then unlocked the further angel investments and a total of 900,000, which has been in small amounts and taken a very long time and a lot of graft, but that's how.
All right. Well, thank you. I mean, that's super inspirational, and sort of really three things that jump out. One of them is the unbelievable amount of hard work and hustle that you put in, right? So if a founder's thinking, I'm going to just message a few people and, make a few social posts. No, you've got to get out there. And I'm guessing you spent a fair amount of your overall time hustling to get that. I'm amazed. That's the 90% thing that I was going to talk about. The next thing is the university spin out. So, this is the point for just a few people, but UK universities are notorious for wanting 30% equity, and sometimes they want it in non-diluting equity. So they get 30%, and you keep topping them up. It's a disaster. So there's been a lot of movement to try and reduce that. These days, there's the new sort of pact that hopefully they get 10%, which is much better. But I'm totally delighted. So thing number two was saying no. Now, saying no to investment is, of course, super tough because investment is really hard to come by. But sometimes you're better off walking away. Some investors just don't get startup fundraising. Some are just a bit too cloying. It crosses over from wanting to help to dude, I want to get rid of you because I don't want that much help. Maybe they want preference shares or anti-dilution or non-dilution. And sometimes saying no is the best thing to do. And the third takeaway point from what you're saying is that actually people, for the most part, are happy to help. So I'm delighted that you said that, you reached out to people, you got an amazing chairperson and so on. And that cold outreach, because one of the key things many founders say is, I don't have a network, I can't get warm intros. You hear investors, say, we like warm intros, but if you don't know anyone to yourself, how are you going to do that? So sometimes people reach out to me, and I'm not encouraging it, but you always want to be nice. Most people want to be nice. And if you have a well-crafted outreach message, if somebody says, hey, Anthony, will you review my pitch deck? It's it's like a half an hour of time. I'd love to. But if somebody says, hey, Anthony, I watched one of your videos and you said this and I saw you had a post on this and that's really important to me. And, you mentioned the sector and I'm doing something in that sector and I'd love your thoughts on something. The fact the person's put a bit of work into contextualizing it for you, showing that they care about you and your unique insights valuable to them, will get them. And I see that's exactly what you've
Yeah.
done. So the third key message is do not be afraid to reach out to people. There's a top tip trick, which is, if you are looking for a warm intro to a VC, go on LinkedIn, look up the person you want to connect to, the VC.
Yeah.
LinkedIn will show you who've got in common, ping them, and of course, write a targeted message. Sometimes people ping me, hey, I see you know so-and-so. Then I look it up because I want to be nice. And it turns out like we connected in 2012. And when I was at the BBC, it's like, sorry, it was like a different universe, but probably not. But if it's more recent, again, most people want to be nice. So that is amazing. So now, let's jump over to a plug for your business. So if someone's watching this and it's either people working for them or they themselves, when should they use WAC?
Yeah, I think it's usually someone you've either worked in an hourly paid job at some point in your life and know what it's like, and in a bar or a retail or a supermarket or something, and had to try and track your hours on paper and looked at your pay slip and wondered if it's right and not really knowing what to do, or shrugged your shoulders and gone, well, what do I, can't do anything anyway. And that's really the kind of normalization that I've been trying to change. So if it's not you now, it could possibly be someone in your family. It could be, a child, or it could be a friend, or someone that is in the NHS or hospitality or retail and in shift work. Our app will 100% give them financial security and hopefully change their life like it has done for a lot of other workers. So yeah, you can see that on the reviews and with the rating. And we just want to push it out. It's super accessible. There is a free version of the app and it will help. So if you know anyone in hourly paid work, definitely let them know about WAC, which is WAC.
Oh. All right, WAC.rocks, right?
Yes. Yeah, or just search on the App Store WAC, it'll come up.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Now let's just jump to picking a valuation. So if you raised 900K, ultimately it was a fairly chunky valuation. Many startups struggled with the valuation north of £1 million. Clearly, you've got somewhat north of that. How did you come up with the valuation? And when investors pressed you on that valuation, did they buy into it? And how did you justify it?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because there's obviously so many things, metrics and ways of figuring it out and working backwards and doing things that you can do as a startup. But really, you don't have a clue. And you do just think, okay, well, this company is raised at this and that's that. And you try and think, okay, let's go with this and see if it works. And you soon find out whether that's a shocker amount and you'll get some feedback or it's, snapped up. Like you can quite easily see that in early conversations. But when I first valued the business, I didn't have a clue what it meant or even how to work out what equity pre and post and the rest of it. But after I figured that out and learned about EIS and SEIS and things that you can do to, try and incentivize investors to do it, I ended up settling at a 3.5 million valuation. And that was a year and a half after we started and about 8 months after we launched. So we'd really launched a beta app. We did have traction. We'd done actually much better than we thought. This was all through COVID as well, which made it even harder to get out and build a network and the rest of it. But we did actually launch the app a week before COVID hit, and the whole of hospitality and retail lost their jobs. So it was the worst time ever. But we ended up actually helping NHS workers, all of like the COVID agency workers that came on, supermarkets, manufacturing, delivery, all the jobs really that were left were hourly paid. So it was really great for us to be able to help in such a tough time with finances when, it was bad enough before, but it was even worse at this point. So we ended up doing okay and did get great traction, and our installs were coming in and we were learning. We just didn't have a huge budget because we'd only raised a tiny amount of investment, so we couldn't market loads. It was really just a slow growth for us at the start, but we just tried to take the data and do as much as we could with it in terms of the product. So it was very early stage traction, and 3.5, I think now was insane. And I think probably we could have raised at 2. But it's a really important point because I've had to catch up with it. So luckily, I've not had to take a down round. And I say luckily, I think it's a little more common now. And if it's a small amount, you know, if you get the money, you get the money. And if it's what you need to do, you need to do it. But what happened was I raised it 3.5, and that was purely based on opportunity. So really, the investors that I were talking to looked and saw like, okay, cool, there's some downloads. The app looks pretty good, but it's early. So it was based on me and the story I was selling and the problem that we were solving, the impact we were having, and the globalization opportunity. And it was how I sold it. And I would quite often come off of the pitches and know that was a good one. You know, you can feel when you've like had a good pitch and really got that across. And I think that was the most important thing, you know, having a really good deck to get on that call and then being able to follow that story and sell that opportunity and show that passion and show the problem you're solving. And, you know, that for me was like the real thing. And so in a lot of the calls, it was about finding investors that cared about the problem, believed in me and thought, okay, stuff it. I'll do 10, I'll do 20, and had the money to do that. So the valuation didn't actually matter too much because it was almost like a figure was discussed and kind of agreed. And it was like, no, I think on opportunity, that's pretty fair. I know a company that's done it at this. I know a company that's done it at that. So I went for it and I did 3.5. And because people bought into the story, and it was like 10K. I think if I had a lead investor come on, you know, over 100,000, which is where valuation discussions came more challenging, then it would be different. But because it was such small amounts, investors were, yeah, okay, that's fair. So I took that first pre-seed 70,000 in at 3.5. And then I then tried to raise the next amount, and I tried to do it at 4, but we hadn't really progressed much. We had a great plan and we had a little bit, but we were a free app, and traction is, you know, it's not money, it wasn't revenue. So a few thousand more users wasn't, you know, taking more risk. So it got tough then. And then I thought maybe I should have raised at like 2 before and then be at like 2.5 now. Like maybe I've shot myself in the foot because I'm trying to go higher because it's been so long and we've made progress since our last raise. But 4 million for this stage is crazy. But I managed to do it again because of the story. And it did take a very long time. And as I said, it didn't come in one round. It was over a continuous, you know, over 1.5 years. And it's really difficult to obviously make decisions and scale and think about growing the team. And, you know, I would have made probably different decisions if I'd had that in one chunk, but I wasn't able to make those decisions because I couldn't hire someone if I'd run out of money the next month. I didn't know when it was coming. So it was really hard to make decisions. But then at the same time, I made every single penny count, and every single investor I spoke to, I would say, I'm doing it on this basis with this cash, I will hit this milestone. And then I'd go and hit that milestone, and I'd go back and be like, right, since, even if it was a new investor, I'd say, this is what I've done with the last 20,000. This is the progress we've made. I need another 20,000, which I'm fine with. And this is the progress I'm going to make. And that really helped, you know, the investors liked that. So I think that helped as well.
Right, well, I think so. That was like really inspirational. I think it was genius, the investor follow-ups with progress and traction, because, you know, the common refrain from investors is founders reach out, take my money, and I never hear from them again. So the challenge with giving investor updates is often there's just nothing to update. Dude, a month has gone by. Our tech team is still fiddling around with the server and we haven't got it live yet, or I'm still looking for a CTO or something, or the numbers are down. We had a good week because somebody wrote us up in a magazine and then the numbers are down again. So you don't have much to report. But if you can, and you can, you know, make it a habit of giving updates frequently, then, you know, if there's a serial investor, you might be the only one in their portfolio reaching out to them. And so when others go, we need money, and one person's been talking to them all the time, you know where the money's going to go. So the second thing is, I think, the enthusiasm that you exude and the passion for the product and the mission, really is palpable. And I think my take is that, I mean, there are many investor personas. Some investors, look at the numbers and look at the spreadsheet and calculate the net present value. Others just look at the founder, and some of them look at the idea or the traction and so on. But in the early days when it's, pre-launch, I think what happens, it's just a gut feel, is that someone makes an investment decision in seconds based on the heart, and then spends hours to try and justify it with their head. So you've looked at the first slide of the deck, you've looked at the mission, you've seen a presentation, a video, you're on a call, and you go, I'm going to bet on that founder, because even though the thing may pivot or it goes south or whatever, they're going to figure out what the answer is. So you want to get the right level of enthusiasm that stops before the bullshit number things that you often hear from Americans, where it's cringeworthy. Yeah, we're going to take over the world. It's like, on the other hand, the British modesties. I built a personal nuclear reactor, but, it's still working in progress, but I'm looking to raise a little money. It may have a major effect. It's like, okay, you could have hyped it a bit more. So finding the right level is super important. Yeah. And I think, you've sort of nailed it there. And then I think just on the technical point of valuation, it's always enticing to raise at a higher valuation. Obviously, it's great for the ego. There's less dilution. For your team, it's exciting. But of course, it does come with the challenge that, particularly if you launch, if you raise before a launch, if you know Schrodinger's cat, the experiment, you open the box with the quantum thing and the cat's alive or dead, but you only discover it when you open the box. It's a bit like people invest and then you launch, and only after you launch is it now proved that there's traction or not. And that once you launch a company, it's never the case, other than maybe Clubhouse or some few things where the traffic is insane. Usually you've got like 50 users and you're delighted, and you tell your investor, they go, how many users? And you go 50, and they're expecting you to go 50,000, but it's only 50. So right after launch is a bit of a downer, and that's when you need money to ramp up growth, get a marketing team, get sales, and so on. So you want to raise enough, number one, to go well past launch, and number two, if you do raise it to a higher valuation, then you do have the challenge that it'll be a down round later. It seems that you've managed to work past that, which is awesome. All right, so now to wrap up, which, if I can put you on the spot, 3 things were your key learnings, or 3 things you would have done differently, or 3 things that you would suggest as key things that anyone watching this do to be successful. Your choice of any more or less of those.
Okay, perfect. So I think number one, something that I would be careful of that has made me lose a little confidence and get quite confused and sometimes go off track and lose time and sometimes money in that case, is because, I've worked so hard on building this great network, which I guess is probably another one, build a network, but we'll come to that. Creating a network, you obviously have a lot of voices then, and people that are involved. If investors come on and they care about it, you've got those opinions, and then you're like, I need to try and find advisors. So I bring on a couple of advisors, and you have a chairperson maybe, and then your teammate, and then you even have family or friends, and sometimes I have found myself in situations where I don't know what the hell to do, and I'm kind of spinning a bit. And I think it's really important to be able to take everybody's advice, but just remember it's advice, and always go back to the reason that you started and you went on that mission, and the things you care about, and the values in the company, and what you want to achieve. And sometimes I've got really stuck where, an investor may say, I think actually you should be doing this, or you look at another company that's done this and it failed, and it's really hard. So I think it's take it all in, listen, because a lot of those things that are said are super, super important. And it could be from people that are really experienced, but have been on a completely different journey with quite often completely different businesses. So it's about, you know, how you manage and organize that feedback and take it in and kind of take yourself away. I love swimming. I love it where I have a time in the day where I have no phone, no distractions, no anything. I think it's important to have a time in the day, especially in the week, if you don't manage it in the day, to really just sit with your thoughts. And that's where I make decisions. And I think if I hadn't realized that was happening, that I was getting so confused and, you know, going down a different path. And then I've kind of thought, I don't want that. That's not where I want to go. I don't want to go B2B. I don't want to charge for the app because I think financial security should be accessible to some degree. I don't want to do that. And it's like, listen to yourself and why did you do it and what's important to you, and make sure you make those decisions based on that. And don't jump to it because you think it's the right thing or you're being told it's the right thing. Because I've been quite aggressively told things, you know, and pretty much made to feel stupid if I don't take that advice. You know, it's like people that are super experienced, you know, have been great help in other places. And you feel like, God, what if I take this and it's wrong? Or what if I do it and or I don't do it and then I look like an idiot and the company fails? And it's sort of like, you have to take those risks and sometimes, you know, gather the info, but base it on your choices. So that's definitely one thing that I think is important.
Okay. And I love your thinking on that. And by the way, that is super important because, and a great point you brought up, because, you know, you go to an investor presentation and the investor gives you feedback and, you know, you're inexperienced, you haven't done this before, and so you think this feedback is like pearls of wisdom. And it turns out to random trap the investor. Sometimes they know what they're talking about, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they've just got a personal feeling. So what you want to do is find the right blend somewhere in between. If you pivot on every bit of feedback you get, it's insane. You know, it's going to be a design by committee and you'll be doing everything and it will be a disaster. On the other hand, if people keep telling you, dude, this isn't going to work, and you keep persevering, well, either you're going to be one of those rare success stories, the guy who patented the intermittent windscreen wiper for cars, spent 20 years litigating against the auto manufacturers and eventually got a huge payout. I mean, I would have given up like 20 years of your life. It's mental. So, you know, all the stress in between of every day I'm suing General Motors and Ford, you know, dude, move on to other things. But, you know, at what point do you go, okay, this is actually valid feedback? And so, you know, what I like to do is exactly that. Do not act on anything instantly, but collate from a few. Think about it, sleep on it over the weekend, discuss it with some people. And sometimes they actually are real words of wisdom and sometimes they're just throwaway lines. But the most important thing is, you know, who owns the outcome? And only you and your team own the outcome. Everyone else has just got random inputs. And I quite like getting random inputs from people and then justifying why they're well-intentioned, but they come at from a different angle. You know, if, for example, if I'm looking to launch SeedLegals in some place and I talk to a law firm, they'll give me a range of ideas, but that will represent their view of the world, which is great, but maybe there's a different worldview. One of the things investors keep telling you is, you know, have everything on a subscription plan. They want monthly recurring or annual recurring revenue. And it's tempting to want to put everything on a subscription plan because that makes you more investable. But maybe your customers don't want it. So these are the challenges.
Really,
Great
really
point.
hard.
Number two.
So I think it would be probably network. Moving on, I think, as I've kind of explained, is having a network is super, super important because it is unlocked at every stage for me, from just advice based on what we've just said, or investment. I think it's really important. Obviously, you have to be careful about how much you're doing. I don't just go to every single networking event, and I usually have kind of an objective. So if I go to a networking event, I'm kind of on a mission to get something from it. And build, you know, relationships, but ultimately get something from it. And I will know what that is. So before I go, I'll think, right, what position am I in at the moment? What help do I need? Is it an introduction to an investor? Is it I'm looking for a fractional CTO? Is it this? What do I need? And I will go that day and just do that one thing. And I think that's really, really important. I also, they have been there for me when I've been through really, really tough times. So in situations where you don't know where to go and you're pivoting at every corner because you're in a desperate state. So when you obviously have hardly any money and you've got an investor that's like, well, I'll give you this, but it's got to be on that. When you're in that desperate, vulnerable state, it's really hard because you think like, well, maybe it's my only choice. Maybe I have to do it. Like I'll have to pivot and I'll have to go down a route and then maybe I can go back to it later. But I've been able to speak to people within my network who don't have an interest in the business, who haven't got any equity, who aren't, you know, an investor or an advisor or anything, and be able to have those really open conversations, to say this is a situation I'm in and to get some really good, honest feedback from that right person. And I honestly don't know where I'd be if I didn't have some of those people. A lot of the ones I'm speaking out are founders, founders probably at a later stage, or exited founders, you know, people that have really, really been through it and understand what you're talking about and actually have the experience. So I think definitely having that network, but having those close people within the network of people that really understand and have your back and will be there for you through tough times is really important. Because I've run out of money about, I think, nearly fully out 6 times. We've nearly gone into administration, which probably leads me to my next, my number 3. So I can go straight on to that if you like, we can reflect on that. So number 3 is, I think, about like resilience, about, you know, you really do need to have that resilience, and you're going to face times in the journey where it really does get very, very hard and very lonely. And that's just me speaking from obviously my perspective. Some companies are lucky enough to be funded and, you know, have the team or have the, you know, to not be in that situation. But for me, because we were non-revenue, we were B2C, you know, I knew it was going to take some time, and it was, you know, we are definitely not hitting all of the tick boxes when I speak to investors. Me being sole founder, non-technical, female, it was all against me. So I knew it was going to take some time. So in my case, I've had to be extremely resilient. And sometimes I have sat there and thought, oh my gosh, do I carry on? You know, this is really hard. You know, you've got even your family, my mom saying like, how long do you have to do this for, George? Like, you can't.
The wedding money and you spent on a startup. You're insane. Find
You're
a
like,
husband. What you do?
You know, because it's like I'm 30 now, which is like, it's not super old, but it's, you know, it's like my friends are buying houses and having babies and getting into great jobs and secure. And then I'm there, you know, like I'm in debt. I've got no kids. My wedding fund's gone. And it is like, God, how long is this going to go on for? And it's, you know, it's been so long of just fight all the time. You do sometimes sit there and think, oh, do I? But I think that's where it's important. Like, you have to be passionate about what you're doing, and it has to be solving a problem. And that has always been very, very clear from the get-go with our business. And we have had great traction. We have had great feedback. We had great ratings and great reviews from the start. So that was really good that I could see that. And I knew it was there. I knew that we had it. It was just a funding thing for us. But I think, you know, if you're in the position where you're just like, not too fussed about the thing, or you're not sure if it's a solution, or you've not done too much research, or you're not, I don't see how it would ever work, because when you face those times like I got to, I just don't see how I'd have got through them if I didn't have that. So it's definitely like, just be resilient and keep going, because I promise there's a way. There's been situations where I'm like, it's impossible. And my friends and family will always say to me, you've been here before, you'll do it again. And I'm like, no, guys, this time I can't. I've exhausted all my options. And they're like, you'll do it. And I'm like, no, will someone just see that maybe I can't this time? But every time I have done it, and now, and for a long time, I've not been in that position, because I got the next money, I'd made the next, you know, growth impact, and then managed to get to the point now where we have great traction. We have gone global. We are introducing the revenue. But so it's really those early stages of having those situations. But if you know you're solving a problem and you're passionate, just treat it as a problem that can be solved and go and find that solution, because I promise you there's one out there. I found money in a swimming pool, not actually in the swimming pool, but from discussions from people and introductions, from just going to the gym in the morning, and, you know, have had investments. I found it from being really honest on LinkedIn and putting a status out saying, well, I've got 2,000 or 3,000 connections or whatever. Isn't this what this platform's for? I'm struggling. Someone help me, give me an introduction, like, you know, and just being honest. And I think sometimes you're kind of pushed down a place where you feel you can't be honest because no one's going to want to invest. But I've literally had money invested with like pence in the bank, because I've been like, look at this, look at the good stuff. If we get this, you need to just believe, and it's finding those people that will take the risk. But
so the other point is, it seems like, to not be afraid to be completely shameless, you know. So the networking is a challenge for two reasons. One, many founders are INTJ. They're introverts, right? So you studied law, you know, normally you probably might want to, the expectation is you're going to sit and look at contracts and talk to occasionally clients. And now it's the opposite. So you have to reinvent yourself with this public, you know, outgoing persona, when actually you might prefer to sit in a room and look at a computer screen and type documents or code or something. And that requires quite a lot of getting out of your comfort zone for founders, myself included. I used to be an INTJ. The last time I did the Myers-Briggs test, it was an ENTJ, because you learn to get out, and then eventually you get to enjoy it. The other thing, of course, is the more time you spend networking, the less time you spend doing product, code, team, and other things. So there's a trade-off. But, you know, the key role of a founder is, you know, you're the first salesperson, the first marketing person, sometimes the only marketing person, the first product person, sometimes for all the only product person, as well as all the founder things. So, you know, and you know, if you can find a co-founder to spread the load, that is awesome. All right. So I think we could talk forever, but we're going to wrap up. Any last thing that you can suggest or that you would like from anyone? How can anyone watching this, help you?
Yeah, I guess we are raising at the moment. So it's we're kind of just getting going. So we've got lots of exciting conversations. So any investors that might watch this, then definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn.
How can they reach you? Where should they reach you?
On LinkedIn, or I don't know if there's a way we can give have the email, my email somewhere. But very happy if not on LinkedIn, and we'd be very happy to jump on a call. So definitely that is helpful. But also I think if founders are watching, just keep going. I just, you know, I want to give all the energy that I have over to founders to say keep going, because it is hard. But there's people out there that will help. And if I can help anyone in any way, even though I'm still pretty early in my journey, I'm always open to that. So yeah, I didn't think I can do it. I didn't think I could get here, and I've got to just here. So yeah, if I can help anyone, I'm always willing.